Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Township of Wainfleet regular council meeting of October 26, 2021 to order. And please stand for the national anthem. Okay, thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest, general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none. Move on to the mayor's announcements. Please note that the meeting proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available through the township website and youtube.com. I attended the Penner Home Hardware Spotlight Gala on October 20th in support of the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center. And I think it was the first official gala since the COVID started. So it was nice to be back to something like that, and it was a great cause for support for kids, abused kids. Port Colborne Wainfleet Chamber of Commerce graciously donated a tree to the township to recognize our community resilience throughout COVID-19 pandemic. And a tree planting ceremony took place on October 22nd in front of the library. We have an upcoming vaccine clinic scheduled in Wainfleet tomorrow, October 27th, and we've also received information of future clinic dates for November the 13th and November the 24th. Please check the Niagara Region website for further information on vaccination clinics. And we will be hosting our annual Remembrance Day ceremony this year on November 11th at the Wainfleet Cenotaph. This event will be significantly modified to ensure health and safety within the community, and COVID-19 protocols will be in place. And Port Cares is doing a pop-up employment event in Wainfleet in the main village area on October 27th and November 3rd between 1 to 4 p.m. A tent and table will be set up promoting their services, including resume and job search help, interview preparations, and academic and computer upgrading. So take advantage of that. Regional Council will meet virtually on Thursday, November the 18th at 6:30, and our next regular meeting at Council will be held Tuesday, November the 16th at 7 p.m. And that's it for the Mayor's remarks. Are there any Councillor remarks? Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just might have missed our land acknowledgement, so I might have just missed it. I can easily acknowledge tonight that we are on the dish with one spoon. So thank you for that. That's fine.
No, thank you. Actually, I did. I missed that completely. So let us do that right now. We'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. It's funny I missed that, but I certainly did. Thank you for picking that up. Okay, any other councillor remarks? Seeing none. Adoption of the previous council minutes. Any corrections or comments? Okay, the motion being that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held October the 5th, 2021, the special meeting of October the 19th, be adopted as circulated. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor McClellan and Councillor Van Vliet. Any other discussion on those minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And opposed? None. That's carried. Okay, we're having a public meeting now, zoning bylaw amendment application Z07-2021, Victor Samuel, 52149 Wilford Road, Part Lot 21, Concession 5. The purpose of the meeting, in accordance with the Planning Act, a public meeting is held for applicants to present their proposal to the public and for council to receive comments from the public. Staff and council will not make a recommendation or decisions on the proposal at a public meeting. A planning report will be brought forward by staff and considered by council at a later date. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Corporation of the Township of Wainfleet in respect of the proposed application, you must make a written request to the Deputy Clerk of the Township of Wainfleet. Okay, and we're ready to receive that information.
All right, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. I've got my screen up here showing the subject property, which is located on the south side of Wilford Road between Meisner Road and Regional Road 24, and known municipally as 52149 Wilford Road. So the subject property is designated as good general agricultural area in the regional official plan, agricultural area and environmental conservation area in the township's official plan, and zone agricultural A2 with an environmental conservation overlay under our zoning bylaw. So the property is currently 20.42 hectares in size and currently has a residential and agricultural use. So the property is the subject of a consent application for a surplus farm dwelling to sever Part 1. And that application was scheduled to be considered by the committee last week, and the committee has deferred consideration of that consent application to the November 17th hearing. The zoning bylaw amendment, and the purpose of the public meeting this evening, is proposing to rezone Part 2 of the subject property from an agricultural A2 zone to an agricultural A2-1 to prohibit dwellings, and an A2-71 zone to recognize a reduced lot area of 19.2 hectares, where the minimum required under the bylaw is 40. And this zoning bylaw amendment is required to comply with provincial, regional, and township planning policies regarding surplus farm dwelling applications and rezoning the remnant farm parcel so that no future dwellings could be built on that farm parcel. In terms of agency comments received, the zoning bylaw amendment was circulated to various agencies and township departments concurrently with the consent application. The following comments are specific to the proposed zoning amendment, and I will note that we received more in-depth comments on the consent. So Enbridge Gas did not object to the proposed application, and our township drainage department noted that the property is assessed to 2 municipal drains, but that due to the nature of the zoning amendment, there were no concerns there. So that is it for my presentation for council, but the applicant's agent, Mike Sullivan, is here from Land Pro Planning, and he has a brief presentation. So I'll turn it over to Michael for that presentation, and then both of us will be available for questions from council.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I think I'll be very brief on this one because Sarah's done a very good job in the presentation. And I don't really have much to add. Aside to say that Part 1, I think we'll be working with the township on revising the application somewhat for the severance for the deferred hearing in November. And I'm here for any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council, please. Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I think it could be probably to Sarah, but usually we have a minimum of about 1 hectare, and even smaller when the area can support it. So, was there any discussion to perhaps make this a bit smaller than what it ended up with? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Cridlin. Yes, that was certainly one of the areas of discussion at the Committee of Adjustment hearing, and something we discussed through the pre-consultation process as well. So the the minimum lot size is 1 hectare, and we will allow it to go a little bit larger, provided there's justification for that. So in some instances, because of the way certain structures are located and the area that's actively farmed, sometimes that goes over a little bit of 1 hectare. So in this case, the extra area was needed to accommodate the poultry barn that's on the property. It's located to the rear of the dwelling. And so the design of that has put it just over that 1 hectare size.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. It just seems a little bit of a conflict that the piece we're carving off for non-agriculture, for residential use, actually has the assets on it for farming. So thank you, for the extra information that's been looked at, and I would still continue to pursue, the smaller amount if at all possible. But thank you for those comments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cridlin. Mr. Sullivan, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in response to Councillor Cridlin's comments, I've been reviewing the application. I was not unfortunately able to make the committee hearing in October, but what I can say is that part of our discussion with the committee in November, we'll be working on reducing the lot size, and I can see a way to do that and not impact the application, so to meet township criteria. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of our presenters? Okay, seeing none. Next steps, Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we didn't have any members of the public registered to speak before council this evening. So we don't have any public input at this point in time. Although for anyone watching, if you want to provide comment on the zoning bylaw application, to please submit your written comments to the planning department. So in terms of next steps, a planning report will come before council regarding a recommendation on the application. However, that will be delayed until the outcome of the Committee of Adjustment decision on the consent application. So in terms of rights for people making oral submissions, so if a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the township regarding the proposed application before council gives approval or refuses to give approval to the application, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so.
Okay, thank you. So just in closing, to the public, if you wish to be notified of the passing of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or of the refusal of the request to amend the zoning bylaw, you must make a written request to the clerk of the Township of Wainfleet. Thank you. That concludes that matter. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to our delegation now. We have the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. We have Steve Miller. No, maybe not. Oh, yep, there he is. Presenting this evening on, he submitted a delegation request to speak about floodplain mapping. And you have 10 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of council. My name's Steve Miller. I'm the Senior Manager of Water Resources with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. The reason we're with you tonight is to present a brief overview of a floodplain mapping study that has recently started in the Township of Wainfleet. With me tonight is my director, Miss Lalani Lee Yates, and we'll be pleased to answer any questions that you might have after the presentation. So let me share my screen. Can we see the PowerPoint? Okay,
no, it's not visible to us here.
It's not visible. Okay, let's try that. How about now?
There we go. Yes.
Very good. Okay. And so the scope of this project is Big Forks Creek, which drains the majority of central Wainfleet and a portion of the eastern portion of Haldimand County. The watercourses that are proposed to be floodplain mapped are shown here in red. Big Forks Creek, of course, is a tributary of the Welland River. There are approximately 110 kilometers of watercourse to be mapped. As part of the project, we're also undertaking floodplain mapping of Beaver Creek and its tributaries in the Township of West Lincoln. We have approximately 74 kilometers of watercourse here to be mapped. I should note that this project is not funded through municipal levy. Rather, it's funded through a special reserve that the Conservation Authority had created a number of years ago to advance the health and scientific knowledge of the Welland River watershed, of which Beaver Creek and Big Forks Creek are comprised. So we do have floodplain mapping on Big Forks Creek, but it was last done in 1986. And that was just the main branch, the branch that flows north of Chambers Corners. A lot has changed since 96. The computer technology and the accuracy of the mapping, we have 30 plus years of weather data to not only update, but provide floodplain mapping for those watercourses that do not have any. Nope. Let's get back there. So through our procurement process, the Conservation Authority had retained WSP Engineering to undertake both projects. WSP was the same firm that successfully completed the Welland River floodplain mapping update back in 2019. As a matter of fact, the same project team that worked on the Welland River is working on Beaver Creek and Big Forks Creek. They bring a wealth of knowledge, local knowledge and understanding to this project. So we talk about floodplain. Floodplain, what is a floodplain? No, briefly stated, it's just the land on either side of watercourse that water naturally runs across and over during times of severe storm events, that the capacity of that watercourse is exceeded. Water then flows across the landscape. So floodplain mapping is an engineering exercise using field surveys and field measurements to measure the extent of those floodwaters during a particular storm event. And here we see a slide. This just happens to be the Welland River as it flows through the city of Welland. And the whole point, we recognize the difference between urban and rural, but the whole point is just to show how these things are delineated on formal floodplain maps by the engineering team. Why is floodplain mapping important? In order to reduce the cost of damages, flood damages within a community, it is important to know where those flood hazards are. By mapping the flood hazards, it does a couple of things. It helps landowners who are already living in the floodplain prepare for a flood event. It also helps municipal staff, municipal first responders better respond to the event. For instance, we're looking at photo on the left, Regional Road 45, Creek Road. If it's understood that this floods during a major storm event, first responders can create contingency plans to get around or avoid this area. We're looking west towards Dilts Road to kind of give you a sense of where we are here. In addition, to help reduce the cost of flood damage within a community, by knowing where these flood hazard areas are, we can better direct new development away from these areas that are flood prone. So what do we regulate? We talk about storms, we can map different storms, but in our part of the world, it's the 100-year storm event, the storm that has a 1% chance of happening every year. In our area, that's about 4 inches of rain falling in 12 hours. There have been bigger storms, and we see for contrast, Hurricane Hazel back in '54, 11 inches of rain in 12 hours. So in order to be fully transparent, the Conservation Authority, before any engineering work was undertaken, before any field surveys were done, we wanted to hold a public engagement session to inform folks about the beginning of this study, give them a chance to meet the study team, ask questions about the project, and share with us their experience living along these watercourses, because they're the folks that have been there for many, many years. We wanted to hear what they had to say before starting this project with any preconceived notions. And so this media campaign took many forms. The first was typical print advertising, Niagara This Week, Farmers Monthly, that kind of thing. And we see a graphic of the ad that was placed. Direct mail. We sent out postcards to all the postal codes within the Township of West Lincoln, Township of Wainfleet, informing folks about the public engagement session and directing them where they could find additional information and where they could send their comments. We used our municipal partners, municipal partners, your staff, West Lincoln, called them in. They were pleased to put our public information session on their municipal community calendars in order to help get the word out to folks. So we held the virtual public engagement session. It would have preferred it to be real live and in person. Hopefully that'll come sooner rather than later. So September 8th from 6 o'clock to 7:30, again, introducing the project team, giving folks a chance to ask questions, and further directing them where they can provide additional information or learn more about the project. And that would be the Conservation Authority's website. On this website, we have a dedicated project page. All the draft reports and draft mapping will be posted here. We have a frequently asked questions section. We have a section where you can post comments. There's my contact information on there. There's a little widget that you can navigate like Google Maps, and it's to find out if your property is located within the study area. That public engagement session was recorded and is posted on this webpage. So this is the one place to go to find out everything folks need to know about this project. And I mentioned we had a public engagement session. We have 2 more planned. All the draft documents will be posted well in advance of that, so folks can review the information and come to those public engagement sessions fully prepared to ask any questions that they may have from the documents we posted to this project page. So we had the public engagement session. Now, after holding that, we can start with the technical work. The field survey begins, the field measurement begins. I mentioned that there will be 2 more public engagement sessions. One is tentatively scheduled for spring, this coming spring, 2022, and that'll be an update to the project. The third one will be scheduled in winter 2022, and that will be to introduce the draft report and the draft floodplain maps. At both sessions, again, folks will be encouraged to ask any questions that they may have in order to develop some understanding and confidence of this project. I should mention that at the end of this project, all the floodplain maps will be freely displayed on our website, much as all the floodplain mapping projects that we have done already is up there for anyone to use. Just go on up, you can take a look at it. All the associated reports and models that were used to generate those floodplain maps are freely available to landowners, to their consultants, to developers, to whoever wants them, in order to make appropriate decisions on whether the where they can potentially, where the floodplain is and how that might impact any plans they might have for that property. And with that, wrap it up. I'm sure both Leilani and myself we are pleased to answer any questions you might have. And let me try and stop sharing here. There we go.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Any questions from any of the council members? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion to receive that report, please? Councillor Gilmore, seconded by Councillor McClellan. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving that report? Oh, I'm sorry, Don.
I was just going to thank them. I think you've already done that.
Okay.
I've seen the material before, so it was nice to see it presented locally. Thanks.
Okay. So it's moved, seconded, it's on the floor. All in favor of receiving that report? That is carried and passed. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller and Ms. Lee Yates. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're going to move into our admin staff reports. And I think we want to do the fire report first. Is there a motion on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would move that we move the admin fire report up to the first part of the agenda and complete what we didn't complete on the 19th.
Okay, seconder for that, please. Councillor Van Vliet, any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. We'll now proceed into the fire report. And we'll look to, I think, probably William to start it off. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The memorandum that you have before you this evening attempts to address some of the discussion points of the special council meeting that occurred last week, 1 week ago today on October 19th. Members will recall that that meeting itself was to consider an independent value engineering assessment that was undertaken by Councillors McClellan and Van Vliet in accordance with previous council direction, which was actually given back in September. Attached to this memorandum this evening is a summary of the discussion points arising from the value engineering assessment, along with some notes summarizing the discussions that were undertaken by council, as well as some additional information prepared or provided by staff and the architectural firm of Raimondo and Associates, who are sort of spearheading the project at this time on behalf of the township. We have attempted to capture as accurately and as closely as possible the context of the discussions that you had last week, and propose that prior to, once I get through my sort of presentation, council do a run through of that appendix to look at those individual items and where we are today versus where we were a week ago. It will also allow staff and the project architects to provide additional information and comments, as staff have been, as all the parties have been continuously attempting to gather additional information in support of council's decision-making process. Following a review of the discussion points, council may wish to consider some of the matters and reports that were previously introduced at prior meetings, but that were not formally adopted or considered by council. And again, some of those reports are referenced in the memorandum that is before you tonight, with links to the original reports. We did not duplicate those reports in the agenda package just due to the size and the length of them, and most of them have been before you on at least one or more occasions. This includes Fire Report FSR 11 of 2021, which is the Central Fire Station pre-tender design and updated cost consultant report, which included a recommendation to staff to prepare and issue a construction tender based on the supplied construction drawings. Another report was FSR 12 of 2020, which laid out a project charter. And then another matter for council to consider this evening before concluding its discussions is a motion that was actually introduced by Councillor Van Vliet at the last meeting last week, proposing to direct staff to proceed with the construction tender. Basically, the same sort of motion that was contained in Report FSR 11/2021. Prior to embarking on any of these discussions, however, staff want to highlight an observation arising from last week's meeting, and it's actually referenced in the report itself. Clearly, staff and I think anyone observing the discussions saw a clear desire on the part of members of council to ensure strict financial oversight and control of the construction-related elements of the project, particularly while the project proceeds. On page 2 of my memorandum, you'll note that staff have identified there is an opportunity to perhaps better achieve success in this area by perhaps dedicating a specific project or construction management resource to the project to provide added fiscal oversight and added project oversight that council appears to be seeking to achieve. Such a resource has the added benefit of permitting the township's current staff, team members that are involved with the project, including myself, CAO, the fire chief, the treasurer, the deputy fire chief, and our operations manager to continue their focus and their efforts on their day-to-day duties, while at the same time ensuring uninterrupted progress, if you will, on operational duties. If properly scoped, this project or construction management resource also has the potential of providing a more robust project reporting program, ensuring that all stakeholders, including council, receive appropriate and accurate and timely information through the life of the construction project. Such a resource also has the potential to be funded within the scope of the project savings that may be generated by the resource itself. Should this be something that council wishes to pursue, an appropriate motion directing staff to prepare a request for proposals along with an appropriate framework for such a resource could be provided this evening as well. That sort of summarizes the memorandum, and I suppose at this time it would be staff's suggestion that council proceed with a review of the appendix or the table, which highlights the discussion points that you were looking at basically a week ago today, and then following that, move through some of the deferred items and provide direction from there.
Okay, thank you, Will. Are there any questions of our CAO at this point? Discussion on that? Regarding the project manager aspect of it, Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, that was my question. Where do you want to proceed? Should we start at the end and work backwards?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps the best way to go is to proceed, pick up where we left off last week, which would mean taking a look at the 20 items that we have here, making sure that we're all sort of aligned in that regard, and then you can move into sort of the newer items from there. That would be my recommendation, but certainly it's up to council on how you want to proceed.
Okay, that's fine. Let's do that. I don't have a fire staff report here, any information. Okay, I do have that hidden away for me, from my eyes anyways. How do we want to start here? You want to go through each item? 1, 2, okay. Item 1, discussion. That's the barn removal, which was approved in September 14th meeting to remove the barn. Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I've had a few requests by different people and have been asked this question. If we could add the barn back in the tender process as a line item so we can see the cost of what it was or what it was going to be, because there was no impact from staff on what was going to happen if the barn was taken out, what would happen. And if we don't add it back in, what are we going to do for, what am I looking for? Operational needs, like for space, training, what have you. So just as a separate line so we can have a number, a real number of what it would have been.
Yep. One of the suggestions that we had was that we could include that in with the tender, but it could be an item that would be severed off once we get pricing on it and that if it didn't meet what we wanted. We've had that discussion. And I'll look to Will. Any further comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest, I see Mr. Raimondo is there. He is sort of the architect, if you will, of the tender package itself, and he may be able to shed some light or advice on that option.
Through you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, yes, that was previously discussed, and the thing to consider are the drawings for the barn renovation are complete and are currently in the package that we had prepared. It would not take much effort to isolate that barn component. We call it a separate price and listed on the tendered form as a separate price. And as Councillor Van Vliet noted, that cost then can be reviewed and further assessed by council. So in answer to your question, it would be very simple to break that out as a separate cost, considering the documents already completed for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further, Councillor Van Vliet?
I just wanted to repeat that I've been asked several times about it, so I just wanted to see if we get it included.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLeod?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Emilio, can you tell me how many square feet that barn is?
From recollection, I believe it's, was it around 2,000, just over 2,000 square feet thereabouts? I don't have the exact number in front of me, but we were taking a portion of it down. And in terms of its remaining portion, it might be just under 2,000 square feet based on the portion that's being demolished.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps the fire chief, if he's on the line, has that information handy or can get it quickly.
Yeah, good evening, council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the ground floor area is 2,000 square feet with the mezzanine retained would be 816. So the gross total building area would be 2,916 square feet. So looking at the budgeted price of the renovation, you're looking at $75 a square foot for the renovation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Follow up, Councillor McClellan?
I'm good.
Okay, anyone else in regards to item number 1? So are we in agreement that we would get that cost estimated as a separate breakout item and then it could be examined by us later? Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't necessarily object, although I'm still feel like the building's oriented the wrong way in the site plan. And I'm not sure that it's worth renovating based on what we could put up something similar. So I'm okay with letting it go and getting a separate price. I'd also like to know exactly what it would be to build a 2,000 square foot storage building with a mezzanine and brand new and orient it in the right fashion on the property rather than renovate a nitrate-filled chicken barn. So I'm not going to oppose it, but I think that we need to do a little bit more with it.
Okay, Councillor McClellan, I think, had his hand first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just doing the numbers here. based on what pricing I received for the airport hangars, we're talking about $75,000 to put up. It would be a pole barn, but it's metal siding, the same as what we're having on this building. So if it's more than $75,000, I think we're wasting our money. Because that would be a brand-new purpose-built.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Emilio, would we use the same footprint? Would the concrete slab be the same that's at the existing barn, or would we move that if we were to build something brand new?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Van Vliet, as Councillor McClellan noted, if we were to consider building something brand new, we would likely remove the slab and prepare the slab to suit the new build. That would be the approach we would recommend. Currently, the slab is being cut back, a portion of it, and our initial thinking as an interim conversation, I think we may have mentioned it the previous or maybe the first council meeting, was should some temporary measures be put in place for some form of storage, i.e. sea containers, then conceivably the slab could remain, or part of that could remain to place the sea containers onto. So those are, sort of decisions that could be made. I guess once we do receive the cost for the renovation, then I think council would be in a position to make a informed decision on what it would be the best approach, whether it be retain the renovation, look at a cost-effective pole barn, or neither, perhaps sea containers. So currently, in answer to your question, the slab would remain in its present position.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on number one? So we have a few options now before us. One is to get a separate pricing on it to do as we had originally thought possible, i.e. renovate the barn and use it that way. We've also now had a suggestion to assess the cost of a whole new building, same size, tear down the barn and put up a new building, which should be explored as well. Chief, do you have any issues there, new building versus the barn, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no. I mean, if council wishes us to investigate another new building, I would be more than happy to work towards that. I think the idea of the renovation was it's an asset that the township already had, and if we could make use of it in its current form, that was the intent. But certainly, if council's direction is to investigate new, then that's what we'll do.
Okay, Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If you put it in there as an item that we might pull or we might not pull, it's called loading a bid, and we'll pay for it one way or the other on the thing. And it just leave it out. If there's enough money, we'll build a new building. If there's not enough money, we don't even know where this is going to come in. Let's see what the fire hall is. That's our main concern. So let's get that part done. Let's not get greedy and look for the whole ball of wax at one time, because there's other ways to build that, and it won't be that expensive.
Go ahead, Councillor Gilmore. I was just going to simply say 2,000 square foot pole barn will cost more than $75,000, I'm sure. So, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I mean, if it's going to be separate, it's going to be separate. We're not going to be tied to it. Right at the moment, it's out. If we don't get a decent number on either part of it, it's still out. Like, out is out right now, and it's still out. So if they want to explore this and fine tune that component of it, as I said, I'm not going to oppose it. If the number's not good, it's not good. So let's just, and I'm with you. If we don't get a good number on the big part, then it's still out. So, I mean, it may be, it may be wasting a little bit of time, but we don't know. So what's bothering me about this whole process is that we're dealing with a lot of numbers that we don't know are good numbers or not. And I want to get past that and get to some solid numbers. So as long as we're all of the same mindset that at the moment it's out and it's going to stay out unless the number comes in at something that's palatable to all of us, majority of us, then I don't see us being in any danger. So right now, let it run its course. I only suggested that it might be a good idea to get a price on something new that fits better in the site plan. But I don't want anybody to assume that because we're talking about something that, quite frankly, I don't think should have been on the list in the first place, but it appeared, then let's let it run its course without tying us to anything. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so I'm hearing that it's out. We all understand that. However, I think that there's no harm in Mr. Raimondo assessing the cost of it and presenting that cost to us. It's not a matter of putting it out at that point. It's a matter of whether we include it or not. So it's out. So I don't think there's harm in that. So I would ask that be done, Mr. Raimondo. Regarding a new building, we could ask the chief to do some investigation there, so at least we have all the facts and come back to us with that information. None of these things affect the fire hall in any way. This is just a supplementary building that we need to look at, and it's currently out, and if things work out good, maybe it'll be back in, but at this point it is out, but it'd be good to have that information. So any other points about that? Okay, so we'll ask those, should we do a vote on that? Show of hands to, okay. Okay, so those two, 2 points I just made, all in support of that? Okay, that is carried. Moving on to number 2, contingency not to disclose. Not, any discussions? Show of hands to accept that. Okay. Cash allowance not to disclose, retained in the budget to be administered by the township. Any discussions? Okay, that's carried. Moving on, oil separator spill pad. Any discussion? Seeing none, show of hands in support of what it is there. Thank you. Fire cistern overflow, $3,000. Any discussion on that? Councilor McClellan, are you?
No,
okay.
I'm just waiting to put my hand up so we get this.
All in favor of that? Okay, that is carried. Cistern suppliers added, creates a competitive bidding process. Any discussion, questions? All in favor? That is carried. And now we're going to move into number 7, the fire cistern. And that was some robust discussion on that last meeting. And is there anyone who would like to discuss this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps we could have Mr. Raimondo take a stab at it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Raimondo, could you provide us with your insight on this, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As noted in the earlier report, we are still working on some of the finite details. At the last we spoke, the comparison would be to look at enlarging the pond and the implications. There was some discussion on that evening with respect to concerns over water capacity and retention. And that's being again reviewed by our civil engineers versus a cistern variety. Currently, the documents have a larger cast in place concrete cistern versus a number of smaller cisterns through a precast manufacturer. So we're currently investigating that further, and we hope to have something back to William in the next day or two on that particular component. From our perspective, our feeling is the enlargement of the pond has likely been exhausted in our earlier conversation with our engineers and their calculations, and based on the groundwater level, which happens to be at 5 meters below grade. And given the amount of runoff we require to sustain that pond, we likely won't have the capacities to service the station, as well as provide additional capacities that can be used by the municipality. So we are looking a little closer at the precast versus the cast in place. And again, as noted, we're hoping to have that information over to William in the next couple of days.
And just to build on that, Mr. Mayor, I think one of the options available to council, as with perhaps some of the other sort of pivotal items, is that there is perhaps an opportunity to go to tender and request pricing for both a cast-in-place model versus a precast model, see which price actually comes back best, and make a decision at that point. Again, as of right now, as indicated by Mr. Raimondo, the original pond option really is sort of questionable. But again, the efforts are being undertaken to rule that out. But again, the option of asking pricing on both those options and then moving forward based on best price might be an option.
I think further to that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, in agreeing with what William, again, we could take the same approach as the barn. We can create some separate prices and look at the viability of either the precast and or the cast in place, and then council and staff could be in a better position to assess their desired direction. So again, we don't see a great deal of effort in being able to modify the tender package to accommodate that approach, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense to me. Is there any other questions or discussions on number 7? Currently, it's Mr. Raimondo will come back with prices in both areas, and we can examine that later. Any questions? Councillor McClellan?
So he's not going to come back with prices. He's going to put it in that the contractor will price it 2 ways.
Right. No. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So I understand what we're doing.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, everybody, if you're in favor of us doing that, please raise your hands, and that's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 8, generator tray to contain any spills. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that? That's carried. And moving on to number 9, the key fob system. And discussion to remove the fob system from the interior doors or retain it. Mr. Raimondo, any comments or other than what we've already had?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. There's been a considerable amount of discussion on that. So our intent is to analyze some of the key interior doors. I think Chief Morgan noted the need for some isolation security should the hall be used for other public venues. So initially we had a total cost of somewhere around $14,500. And I think we had a series of, I think, 8 to 10 doors from recollection, but we're going to reassess all that, and there will be a cost savings. We just need to determine which doors we will retain. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, just to build on that, we are focusing on the exterior doors coming into the structure being fobbed, and then primarily one entry door which separates the administration side from the bays, and then all other doors would be either a traditional key lock or unlocked, depending on what their use is.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on that? So that pricing will come back to us as part of the research on that. Any other further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of that happening? That is carried. Thank you. Moving to number 10, the structure, no changes or alternatives were discussed. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of that? That is carried. Heating systems, number 11. We were going to do some further investigation on that, radiant heat, heat pumps, et cetera, and boiler systems. Any further comments on that, Mr. Raimondo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just speaking with our consulting
You're on mute,
engineers.
sir.
Oh,
You're on
sorry.
mute.
Can you hear me? Through you, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, it shows that you're not on mute, but we cannot hear anything.
That's odd.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, while we attempt to get Mr. Raimondo's audio connection checked, again, I think staff have tried to, and Mr. Raimondo have tried to review things. I believe we're still of the opinion that in the long term, including both the installation and then the long-term use of, radiant floor heating does provide a very good, if not perhaps ideal type of heating for the bays. And due to the nature of the bay heating system, provides sort of an easy extension into the administration side of things. I think we might have audio back, and I wonder if Mr. Raimondo could perhaps pick up where I left off.
Yes. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. It's all good now.
Fantastic. So just earlier, prior to our meeting, I had conversations with our mechanical engineer, and they're assessing the options and alternatives. So again, this can be sort of structured similarly. We could certainly look at costs, as again, the drawings are completed in a manner that provides the systems as shown. And then we could look at some alternates and consider the costs. Certainly from an efficiency perspective, the radiant heat system we believe to be very efficient, a little more costlier, as noted, but over the life cycle of the building, I think the system will prove to be beneficial. But again, we are certainly open to suggestions and assessing this further for council's benefit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Raimondo. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with both the CAO and Mr. Raimondo on this item. I stated that at the last meeting. I'm a fan of it. I think while the upfront cost is slightly higher, the long-term benefits far outweigh that. So I would move that we, or I would propose that we leave that in and leave the drawings as they are as far as that aspect goes.
Okay, any other discussion on that? That's a motion then, Councillor Gilmore, or a direction that we just leave it all as is? Any other discussion to that point? Councillor McClellan?
So when you say all as is, we're talking about just the inflow heating part of it.
As the original drawing is, from my understanding, correct? Original design. Mr. Raimondo, is that correct? It's just from the original design?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Councillor Gilmore?
I think where Councillor McClellan's going is that there may be possibilities to eliminate further redundancies or duplicate heating systems. However, this item specifically just addresses the slab. So my goal is to not change that component of the drawings and leave it in. If Mr. Raimondo and the team have some ability to tidy up some of the other concerns as far as duplicate heating systems, I'm all for that. I'm merely speaking towards the in-floor radiant heat in the slab.
Thank you. Mr. Raimondo, that would be a given, correct? That obviously if we go with the in-floor heating system, any other heating systems not required would be removed from the drawing and the costing of the project, correct?
We will look at, the heating system, the HVAC system, heating, ventilation, air conditioner, all tied together. last meeting, there are identified of 4 systems, but 2 of those systems are electrical supplemental heat that would occur in vestibules or storage areas. So likely that's not going to change. So the primary systems are basically your radiant heat that not only is in the apparatus space, but also in some of the administrative office spaces, and then some supplemental heating through, I believe, some mechanical ventilation, fan systems, rooftop type systems, air handlers that are also heating, cooling. So, and we spoke about, even with radiant heat, it's always a good thing to have some redundancy. But again, we will certainly have a look at that, Mr. Mayor, and determine its need.
Okay, thank you. Definitely, that's our goal. We don't want to be paying for 2 heating systems to heat one area, with one being redundant. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so let me get this right then. We are going to stick with the split systems and not the ceiling mounted systems?
We haven't decided yet as a council, so it's
that's
still
what
in
we
discussion.
talked about last week. That's what it showed on savings. We're going backwards here. And so I guess the question is to Mr. Raimondo, are you going back to the ceiling mounted heating systems that were in the real and air conditioning systems that were in the original drawings, or are we going with the splits?
I mean, if the intent is to retain what was drawn, we would stay with the ceiling mounted fixtures.
That's not the intent.
However, again, we can take a similar approach to the other items where we've provided some separate prices for the wall mounted systems, Councillor McClellan.
But, okay, thank you. Any further, Councillor McClellan? Any further on your continuation? Go ahead.
Yes, so last week we talked about going with the split systems and there was a savings. We're just going backwards and going back. Why did we even have the value engineering? Why did I waste my time? We're not saving anything. This is going to come.
Okay.
We're just giving back everything that we put in, and it's gonna blow the budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gilmore.
Just want to be clear, I'm only talking about point 11, not 12 on the list.
Well, but it combines items 11, 12, 14, and 15.
Okay, but
yeah,
we're going line by line.
I know what
Mr. Mayor, can we get order here?
I want to just talk
one at a time, please.
I still have the floor.
Yes, Councillor Gilmore, carry on.
So I'm only talking about line 11. I just want to leave the radiant heat in the floor. We'll deal with 12, 13, and 14 if there's a way to deal with it effectively. But so let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, if Mr. Raimondo says that they're lumped together, then they should have been lumped together. They're broken out. I'm talking about line 11.
Okay. Mr. Raimondo, can you give us some guidance there in regards to the other lines? It's sort of all tied together, but we're looking at the in-floor heating system, which is Councillor Gilmore's suggestion that we keep that. Your thoughts
Correct.
there, if we keep it?
So the systems, certainly I think the intent was to keep it in the apparatus space. But the systems are all within the entire building. They're all knit together in essence, because you have your boiler systems that control all the heating more or less throughout the building. So in lumping them all together, they are part and parcel of the end resultant of a system that's designed for the fire station. If we were to go back to Councillor Gilmore's suggestion about the radiant heat, if the primary concern is to leave it in the apparatus as per last week, then we would go back to sort of the combined end resultant of making some modifications to the administrative area with the split systems as noted by Councillor McClellan. So that would require, again, some re-engineering and a little bit of time to readjust the drawings in preparation of tender.
Okay, thank you.
So the systems, in essence, through you, Mr. Mayor, you know, the systems are all intricately tied together. And that, you know, that's sort of the difference, and that was the approach that was taken. And we, you know, it was our opinion that approach would provide better efficiencies in use of the boilers, et cetera. However, again, we could fine tune it a bit. We're having the engineers review it to see if there's any economies that can be had within that original radiant heat system.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Gilmore has suggested, excuse me, Councillor Gilmore has suggested that we keep the radiant heat. Everything would hinge off that. If we decide as a council to keep the radiant heat throughout as per the original drawings, then the rest of the heating system would fall into place as it was originally drawn. That's my take on it, with any other efficiencies that Mr. Raimondo can come up with. That's how I'm understanding this right now. Am I correct? Anybody see differently? Councillor McClellan?
I absolutely see it differently, sir. It's the air conditioning and heating units that are in the ceiling are run off of 2 heat pumps that are shown outside the building. The boiler has nothing to do with that. So let's get the boiler out of the picture. They're confusing it, they're making it cloudy. That's out of it. So what you can go with is each of those units in the ceiling, if you go back and look at what we had, were $10,000 a piece. There's 10 of them. There's $100,000 there, plus the 2 big heat pumps. You can go with mini splits that will give you heat and air conditioning, and they're wall-mounted units on the wall of the building inside the rooms, and they will do the thing. When you need to do a repair, the repair is outside. You don't have to pull ceilings down and get at air conditioning units and heat units that are ducted in the room. It's a world of difference. What they're telling us is not what's there. We're being buffaloed.
I'm sorry, you've lost me now. Why are we being buffaloed, as you say?
The heating and air conditioning units that are in the ceiling have nothing to do with the boilers. Yet they're telling us it's got something to do with the boilers. It's 2 separate systems. Mr. Raimondo just told us that. They're intimately tied together. They're not.
Who is they in this?
Mr. Raimondo just said.
I know, but you're saying, your
So-
use of the word buffaloing us, which means somebody is misleading us, is how I take
In
that.
my opinion, we are being misled.
By
because
who?
they're-
By who?
By what was just said, which was Mr. Raimondo said their boilers are connected to the heat pumps. They're not. If you understand heating and mechanical systems, they're not connected.
Okay, Mr. Raimondo, would you care to make a comment on that? And then Councillor Cridlin right after that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, going back, what I would like to do is get the opinion of our mechanical engineers. They are preparing their report related to the options we had discussed. We can certainly convey to them that the intent is to retain the radiant heat and look at the alternates if that's what this council desires.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you. I'm just going to see if I can repeat then what I've heard. I think we're agreeing on the radiant heat.
Well, we haven't agreed on it yet. It's just a discussion still at this point.
So if we can, I'm going to just then ask if we do 11, then what I think I'm hearing 12, 13, and 14 will be done similarly to what we've done with item 7, let's say, where we're going to come back with some more work having been done on the split system, et cetera, and the tender could go out then with both. So the 11s, radiant heats throughout, but then the 12, 13, 14 would be one of those things that are going to be going out with what's there, and then whatever we find out between now and when the tender goes out.
Okay.
Is that where we're
following
at?
you? Yes.
Okay.
So I think the first thing we must do is establish whether or not we want to keep the original drawing with the heating system with the in-floor heat as per Councillor Gilmore's options there. So is there any other discussion on that? And we should have a vote on that to see if we want to keep that system, because then everything else flows from that. So, Councillor Gilmore.
Yeah, Mayor, I apologize for continuing repeating myself, but the heating is one thing and the air conditioning is another.
Yeah.
Councilor McClellan is, in my opinion, correct that there's some duplication, and there are better ways to air condition a few rooms that may or may not need to be air conditioned all the time. So all I was trying to accomplish was keeping the floor heating the same. So I wish we could, I agree with you. Let's just talk about 11, and then let's talk about how we're going to air condition some other rooms down the line. If we don't agree that in-floor heating in the entire slab is not the way to go, then we can talk about that. But
I'm good with that.
But I believe that it's better in the long term and more efficient in the long term. That's
okay. So the same point we've already I've made a couple times. So I'm prepared to seek a vote on this, whether we keep the in-floor heating. No further discussion. So everybody in favor of keeping the original in-floor heating? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we move on, and my understanding is now, Mr. Raimondo, from that, redundancies will be checked, and further research needs to be done by yourself in regards to streamlining the other systems that are co-related to the in-floor system. That's what I understand. And you'll come back to us with that information. Am I correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, we'll retain the radiant heat throughout the building. We'll look at what may be considered redundancy in, say, fan systems that are both heating and cooling. We'll look at the drawbacks, I guess, of deleting the redundancy, and then we made that certainly clear the last meeting that in some cases redundancy can be beneficial. And then we'll look at the cooling side separately, as noted by Mr. McClellan, with perhaps wall-mounted systems. And then we'll report all this back to council through staff.
Okay, that's exactly how I'm seeing it, and I think everybody's in agreement with that. Everybody agree with that process? Hands up, please. Okay, so that's taking care of number 14 and 15. 12. All right, 12, I missed that one. Okay, 13, please, the UV water filter. Any discussion? Councillor Gilmore?
Yeah, thank Mayor. I think that we dealt with that. That was one of the things we did deal with, that it should be just individual room specific rather than this sort of quote corporate UV thing to do everything. So I thought we had dealt with that. I think that number is a little bit inflated based on what we can do. So I think we sent that message. Mr. Raimondo can correct me.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Yeah, we did actually do a little further research on individual systems, as noted in the kitchenette, I think was one of them. And we would, determine, say, washroom, lavatories, eye wash, deluge station. But at minimum, based on Culligan Water's estimate, they were roughly $1,200.
We lost you, Mr. Raimondo.
Oh,
we lost you again.
Again. Yeah.
It's at our end, I think, so just hang on a sec.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, try it now, Mr. Raimondo. Yep, you're there.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's at our end, not your end. So.
Yeah. Just follow up with Councillor Gilmore. I think to make it really simple is we'll look at 2 residential style UV systems, and we'll determine where best to place them, whether one's in the kitchenette and one serves the washroom, lavatories, and maybe is connected to the eye wash deluge, because you'll need clean water there. And we'll provide those in the documents. One option might be to list a couple of different suppliers to get some competitive bidding to make sure we get the economies of scale there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that is listed in here. It was originally $7,500, I believe, and so now it's two at $1,200 each. So as per our previous request. Everybody all in favor of that, please? Show of hands. Okay, that's approved. Moving on to number 16, hose bibs. Eliminate 2 exterior hose bibs. Chief, I'd like to hear from you because an exterior hose is very useful in different areas. Thoughts? Chief? Is he gone? Oh, there he is.
My apologies, sorry. I was taking a look at the plans here. I mean, certainly if council determines, I understand Councilor McClellan's rationale. You know, this is we're on a holding tank or a cistern. So, you know, the hose bibs, you know, for watering flowers and stuff like that, isn't an effective use of taxpayers' funds. So, I mean, if removing 2 hose bibs is something that, you know, council wants, as a, you know, a water consumption or conservation measure, then that's fine.
Yeah, my thinking, I agree with the flowers, all that sort of thing, but my thinking was more along the lines, would you need it to wash equipment or anything like that? Where you would go, oh, I wish we had a hose bib here, we got to wash, you know, whatever equipment. Is that the case at all, Chief?
So there are hose bibs in the apparatus bay, and where they are located, we the 2 remaining, when we reviewed it, put them near the apparatus bay. And additionally, we do have a fixed pressure washer at the southeast corner. So in the event that we had to wash equipment, we would just do it at that particular location.
Okay, fine. Any other questions on that? Everyone in favor of that? Raise your hands, please. Okay, that's carried. Number 17, the bunker gear. Further investigation on that. Look to Mr. Raimondo on that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, well, I'm going to sort of tie it into the whole approach. This particular fire station has a conventional septic field. So it's designed roughly for 4,275 liters per day. It has a double bed approach. It's been designed by a consultant who has worked for the region, is very familiar with septic design. And that approach initially was taken from an economics perspective. There are other systems that are out there. I think there are a number of systems that are approved by the ministry, EcoFlow being one, Waterloo biofilter being another. And they're a little bit more expensive to build, although the tile field becomes roughly half the size. But you'll have a yearly maintenance expense, and you'll have the cost of additional holding tank. Whereas the conventional system, basically, it gets pumped out to a tank with a grinder pump, and the grinder pump goes into the septic field. So with the bunker gear storage, one of the concerns with the washing process was the potential for contaminants that aren't necessarily treated through the detergents, and they may end up in the septic field, and then the town over time could be presented with a risk and liability. So in speaking today, there really aren't any, speaking with our consultant, there aren't any, call it septic systems that would create a more biodegradable environment that would deal with any potential hazardous toxins, etc. So that would sort of throw upgrading the septic field out of the equation. Secondly, following up with the detergent manufacturers, we did take the time to do so, and they were somewhat, they stood behind their products, but they were somewhat non-committal in terms of how they would be effective against any contaminants or hazards. So they remained kind of non-opinionated. So that kind of threw that kind of assessment of risk out the window. One of the suggestions was to put a holding tank in, and that attributed to roughly around $13,000 cost, order cost that we had estimated. And in speaking to our septic field consultant, his recommendation would be to put the tank in. In doing some research related to costs for the tank and pumping that out, Chief Morgan did some calculations based on the number of times they would wash equipment in a year and the cost to have the tank pumped out, which worked out about $200 per occasion, and we estimated roughly 3 times a year. So there'd be roughly about a $600 cost to extract the stored liquids and dispose of that. Incidentally, when we compared it to, call it a Waterloo biofilter septic system, their costs when compared to the Grimsby Fire Station, which has a similar system, worked out to roughly $600-700 a year. So the only caveat is, even with the Waterloo bio system, if there are contaminants in the tank that might be detrimental to the bacteria cultures, so that will prove that won't prove well for the septic operation. So in speaking again to our septic field designer, and I think concurring with Councillor McClellan, we believe the best approach would be to put the additional tank in, store that fluid that's produced from the bunker gear washing, and have it pumped out 2 to 3 times a year at minimum, at a minimal cost. So that was sort of our review of that. Chief Morgan, if you're welcome to certainly add to that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Romano. Chief, any comments?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Through the last week, you know, I sent a request for information out through the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, and I did receive some responses back from fire departments around the province that do use septic systems for their laundry, for their bunker gear extractors, and to date, I mean, again, the detergent manufacturers were, you know, they committed to that their product was septic safe, but they wouldn't commit because they don't know what is being washed. I mean, and that's no different than any person who uses a septic system in Wainfleet. You know, I mean, if you dump a gallon of diesel down your toilet, you've contaminated your septic. So, you know, those are some of the things that are considered. I did speak with the deputy chief of Grimsby, who was involved in that the construction of that station, and in his past life was a wastewater tech for another municipality, and they utilized the Waterloo biofilter system. And part of the service contract that they have is that they have annual samples taken as part of the maintenance contract, both from the sewage coming into the tank as well as the effluent leaving the filter system before going to the environment. And he's provided me with last year's sample. They've been operating that system for 3.5-4 years now. And the water that's coming out of that system that he provided with me is you know, certainly environmentally safe. But again, you know, through Mr. Raimondo's his septic consultant, again, not knowing what contaminants are going in, there may be impacts to the bacteria that operates, not through detergent, but through others. So, I mean, really what we're looking at is there's going to be an increased cost over a conventional septic, and additional annual maintenance or outrun costs, whether it be through pumping or through the service contract. So those are really our options, unless council's comfortable with just putting it right to the septic.
Okay, thank you, and look for discussion, but I see our CAO has comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. And again, just to summarize the discussion, I think out of an abundance of caution, from a staffing perspective, from the investigations we've done, straight into a basic septic system is probably not the best course of action. Moving to Councillor McClellan's original suggestion of an intermediate holding tank is a good, viable, and probably least cost alternative to improve the situation. And then the other option above and beyond that basic holding tank is a sort of biofilter style septic bed, which again, as indicated, is a more costly endeavor. The bed is actually smaller in the end, but those are the basically two options, I think, that are being recommended at this time, either proceeding with the basic tank or going for the enhanced biofilter style septic bed. And again, the options, I think, before council, choosing one of those two options, tank versus biobed, versus maybe asking for pricing on both those options and then making a choice, although I think the general consensus is the simple tank is the lower cost alternative.
Thank you. Discussion by council. Okay, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I guess, I mean, it's better than what we heard last meeting. I still struggle with the comment that they hose themselves down at the scene and that goes on the ground, and what comes off the house goes on the ground. And then further to that, I struggle with the ongoing reports of the city of Montreal dumping raw sewage into the St. Lawrence. However, all that seems to be okay. All that being said, I think that the tank and pumping it out for a few $100s, which is a lot less than we heard last week, is probably the best choice.
Thank you, and I agree. And just because I know your comment, I agree. Just because other places are doing bad doesn't mean that we should not do our best. So going with the extra tank for the bunker gear washing and that holding tank, as per the comment by Councillor Gilmore and Mr. Raimondo, is everybody in favor of that? And that is carried, so that's what we're going to do. Moving on to the washroom fixtures, electronics, reducing that by $16,500. Any discussion or comment? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Lighting sensors, reduction of 4,000. Consider motion sensors in limited spaces. Discussion, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And that's it. Number 20 is C19, and so we're done. Does anybody need a break? Recess? Councillor Gilmore?
I think before we recess, I'd like to deal with the CAO's final comment on the memorandum.
Yeah, that was good to get that done, the rest of that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the final comment was regarding the project management, construction management type resource to sort of, again, provide their complete attention, if you will, to the project while allowing staff and, internal resources to, again, focus on their day-to-day stuff. If that is something that council would consider as an alternative, the suggestion from staff would be that a request for proposals or a tender be let. We would need to very strictly delineate the sort of role or scope that that position would, or that resource would fulfill. Again, keeping in mind that under the current and the originally planned effort, Raimondo and Associates do have a role to play in the contract administration of the general contractor who will eventually be building or constructing the facility. And there will always need to be sort of input from staff regarding any issues that might come up from time to time, but it's that construction or project management resource that would be the primary sort of on-site oversight body, if you will, to ensure that costs are being appropriately controlled by the general contractor, that any sort of recommendations that might be coming from the general contractor are appropriate for the project and our ultimate needs of the township. So I throw that out there, and we'll try to answer any questions if possible.
Councillor Gilmore, or Councillor McClellan, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I absolutely agree this is what we should do. What I would like to do, whoever we get, to whoever it is, to go through our tender packages. He's going to be our eyes and ears on the job. So go through it quickly and then get back to Emilio if he finds things that he sees there's potential problems. The whole thing is we want this to go smooth. We don't want battles. We don't want arguments. We don't want to end up in court. So, you know, if this is what they do for a living, let's let them go through it quickly. I don't know, give them 10 days to go through the package and get it done. I'm sure there's no mistakes in it, and the guy should go through it in a couple of days, but just in case he finds a point or two, that we do it, and then we put it out to tender. So I would suggest we try and get this done in the next 10 days, and then give whoever the firm is 10 days to look at it, and we can still get it out to tender before the end of November.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or comments? Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, who would be choosing the project manager? Would that be staff now? Because I don't think any member of council should interfere with that.
No, I think it'd be staff making that choice.
Well, through you, unless council were to delegate that authority to staff to make the choice, what our proposal would be issuing a broader, open to the market request for proposals, assemble those responses, prepare a report back to this body as a council, and then have you as a council do the selection based on specific criteria. Again, unless you delegate it to staff, where you might provide us direction that, you know, the highest scoring firm be selected, or the lowest priced firm be selected, or whatever. So, I mean, ultimately, I think it needs to come back to this body for its approval.
Other comments? Councillor Gilmore.
Yeah, I totally concur with that. We're not going to leave that on staff, just like we don't leave the budget, we don't leave anything. They have a job to do, and so do we, and we're going to do it. Are you ready for a motion?
I am. I have one in front of me if you want me to read it.
Go ahead, use yours.
Okay, so the motion being that the memorandum submitted by the Chief Admin Officer respecting the Township of Wainfleet Central Fire Station project be received, and that Council direct staff to proceed with the preparation and issuance of a request for proposal for project management services for the fire station construction project. A mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Gilmore moves it, seconded by Councillor McClellan. Any final discussion on that? Councillor Cridland.
Just in terms of more detail, how long would that sort of, or when would that close, so that we can keep things moving? What's a reasonable amount of time for that to be out in the public domain?
Through you to members of council. Well, we'll need to actually prepare the RFP, issue it. You probably want to keep it open for a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, 14 to 21 days. Assemble the information back, score everything according to a sort of preset scoring or pre-prepared scoring matrix, and prepare a report to come back to council. So
We should see that in December, probably.
hopefully.
Yeah, Councillor Gilmore.
Okay, just before we bog ourselves down on any potential delay problems, just curious, Mr. Raimondo, how close are you to being ready to issue the plans for tender?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, reviewing the list, making some alterations to tender package, I would still say, and I think as mentioned in our earlier previous meeting, we're probably looking at mid-November, first couple of weeks of November, probably 3 weeks away, if not less. But I would safely target mid-November. We'd be in a position to have the documents ready or turned over to the project manager, if that's council's decision to review. And perhaps that could run concurrently with the PM RFP and selection process.
It sounds like it would. Go ahead, Councillor Gilmore.
Yeah, so there's going to be some overlap. I would suggest that our RFP for the project manager only be open for a maximum of 2 weeks. I don't see why this needs to be that long. And, regrettably, you're going to have to make this a priority on top of all your other priorities so that we can tie it into the whole project and move this ahead. So I would suggest that it's only 2 weeks open, and we'll get it out as quick as we can and try to let it overlap, and hopefully by the December meeting, everything is gone.
2 weeks, okay with everybody? Agreement to that? Okay, everybody's nodding yes. So we'll do that for 2 weeks. Any other comments or discussion before we vote on this? Seeing none, so the motion stands. It's on the floor. We have a mover seconder. Discussion is finished. You want me to read it?
Reread it so we're all clear.
Okay, so that the memorandum submitted by the Chief Admin Officer respecting Township of Wainfleet Central Fire Station project be received, and that Council directs staff to proceed with the preparation and issuance of a request for proposals for project management services for the fire station construction project. It's moved, it's seconded, discussion is done. Councillor Van Vliet, yes?
Mr. Mayor, do we have a budget for that position?
Well, I'll look to the CAO regarding the dollars on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we don't, actually. What we'll do is try to bring those numbers back, put them before you, and as indicated in the memorandum, I think the expectation or the hope is that the entire resource be borne within the project budget, and that the anticipated savings, including savings that have perhaps already been identified, as well as any savings that the project manager or project resource person might be able to achieve in controlling costs and all that, would help fund that element of the project.
Councillor Van Vliet, follow up? I think when we talked about the PM before a year ago, we were looking at $100,000 to $150,000 was a kind of a number we were, and that's why we stepped away from it and tried to see what else we could do. So I think you're going to be looking at that amount of money probably, and hopefully we can, as CAO said, through efficiencies we can save some of that or most of it. Councillor McClellan.
So two things. I think we'll be south of 100,000 from the inquiries I've made about it just before we went with this. And the other question is, where are we going to advertise this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll certainly be doing our normal advertising locations, which include online and various commercial type websites that we routinely advertise on. In addition, we'll try to target specific advertising locations that I'll call the trades use, so that we're able to hit them. Right now, at this moment, I don't have a specific list of them for you, but if you have any that you're aware of that we could approach, then by all means get those into our office, and we'll include those as well.
Yeah, I think just the regular contractors here, everything goes through the Niagara Heavy Construction. So if it goes there, then it'll get posted out. I think most people are members of that.
Okay, thank you. Shall we vote? All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so one last item here before we take a short recess is we deferred the motion from the previous meeting by Councillor Gilmore and seconded by Councillor Van Vliet. Yeah, I thought that's what it was. But and that was that the fire staff report respecting the Central Fire Station pre-tender design updated cost report be received, and that Council directs staff to proceed with the preparation and issuance of a construction tender for the fire station based on construction drawings as attached, and that staff be directed to return to Council upon completion of the tender process to award the tender to the successful bidder. That was the motion, and that was deferred. Is any discussion on it? Councillor McClellan? No, this is a separate motion from the previous meeting, I understand, and we should... Meredith, I'll look to you. How's that gonna, we just rescind it, or the motion could be withdrawn, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the other option is, if you want to read into that, you can request that that motion be amended, because technically the deferred motion is back on the floor in front of council in the format, it's exactly the same format that it left a week ago. So if you, at this stage, it's before council. If you want to introduce an amendment, then as a council, you have the ability to do that, and then proceed with the amendment, and then proceed with the original motion as amended, if that is the desire of this body.
Is this motion, though, we've just accomplished that, have we not, by going with the project manager? And isn't that cause this motion to be moot?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it does not, because that motion speaks to actually preparing the tender for the actual construction job itself. Now, I heard some discussions about that we should proceed with the preparation of the final tender. There was some direction that was given to the architects regarding all those 21 things we went through line by line, make these changes to the original tender documents, and then there was also the sort of contingencies, include a price for this, don't include a price for that. So, I mean, all those documents need to be prepared and then let. The other discussion that was had was trying to get the project manager resource online to review that tender before it actually issues. And I believe that's the sort of discussion that Councillor McClellan is suggesting be added to that motion in order to capture council's direction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan.
So CAO has said exactly what I was going to say. The way this motion reads right now, everything we talked about, a project manager, is out the door. So we have to amend this motion that they can prepare everything, get it done, but nothing goes out till we get a project manager and he has a chance to review the documents. It's not going to stop anything. It's what we just talked about.
Okay, so Meredith, are you documenting that as an amendment to that?
Through Ms. Mayor, yes, and we'll just need a seconder on the amendment.
Okay, seconder on the amendment. Councillor Gilmore. Any discussion on the amendment itself? Councillor Cridland.
Through you, I think I would just like to review now where we are with the original motion, which I was following.
But first we have to deal with the amendment, then we come back to the original motion. So
oh, correct. So
the amendment is, as Councillor McClellan stated.
Thank you. So I'll just deal with the amendment. Could I just have it repeated then in terms of the amendment? Thank you.
Look to the clerk to
yes.
read that back, please.
Yep, so the second part of that would be that council directs staff to proceed with the preparation in consultation with the project manager of a construction tender for the fire station. Is that accurate, Councilor McClellan?
Yes, but we don't know who that guy is, so until we hire a company, we can't put it out. You know, I mean, we've asked to hire a project manager. We don't know who that is. We don't know if it's a private individual, a company, or who it is. So until we know who that is, we hire them next council meeting, then we tell them, go ahead, review the documents, and then it goes out. Whatever changes come or don't come, then it goes out to tender.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we're capturing the same thing. The issue is that the project manager is not making amendments to the current tender for construction. That has to be done by staff and Mr. Raimondo, and it's only after those amendments are made that the project manager looks at it, and then it goes out. But again, it also comes back to council before it goes out as well.
Okay, so that amendment has been made to the motion. Any other discussion on the amendment itself? Councillor Gilmore.
Well, I think to tidy it up, all that really needs to be said is that the documents get prepared. We're gonna send it out once the yet to be named project manager has a chance to review it, then everything goes out. I think the point is that based on this exercise and everything that we've done right up till now, that we as a group are comfortable sending the drawings as they are out, pending the review of the yet to be named project manager. That's
correct?
I mean, is that fair, Councilor McClellan, through the mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there's some amendments or changes that Raimondo and Associates have to do that we went through this list. When that's done, yes, we're good.
So we do have the essence of it captured.
Yes.
So if there's totally. So if there's no further discussion on the amendment to the motion, okay, ready to vote. All in favor to that amendment?
Mr. Mayor, on this one, I'd like a recorded vote.
Okay, recorded vote. On the amendment, we're just on the amendment only. Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor.
Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
And I am in favor. So the amendment is carried. So now we turn to the motion. The motion has already been put on the floor from the last meeting. And so we only have to have any further discussion of it as amended with the additional amendment to it. Is there any other discussion to that? Councillor Gilmore.
I'd like it read and also request a recorded vote.
Okay, I can read the first part and then I'll ask the clerk to add the amendment because I don't have that right in front of me. That fire staff report, FSR 011-2021, respecting the Central Station Fire Station pre-tender design and update cost report be received. And that council directs staff to proceed with the preparation and issuance of a construction tender for the fire station based on the construction drawings as attached to this report, and that staff be directed to return to council upon completion of the tender process to award the tender to the successful bidder. And the amendment, please, Mrs. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the amendment would be, and that council directs staff to proceed with the preparation in consultation with the project manager to review prior to issuance the construction tender for the fire station based on the construction drawings as attached to this report.
Okay, it's already on the floor, moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on that? Councillor Gilmore.
The only thing that's a little ambiguous is the inclusion of all the discussion. It doesn't particularly say that. I realize that it's implied, but it should read that based on the amended report, because we amended this report by this exercise.
Correct. And again, through you, Mr. Mayor, we've gone through basically item by item and done a show of hands on each amendment to the original drawings, and those are those will be incorporated into the tender documents that will be reviewed by the project manager once.
No, I know that. It needs to be said. So it's been said, and I move the previous question.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Do you recorded vote anyone again on this one? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Gilmore. So a recorded vote. Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
In favor.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor.
Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
And I am in favor. That is carried.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the remaining report that's referenced in the memorandum is actually report FSR, sorry, I'm just trying to get to it. There we are. FSR 12, I'm going to say 12, but I don't have it in front of me. FSR 12/2020. And again, members will recall that is the original project charter that was introduced some time ago, with the sort of direction, if you will, to include a project manager. I think staff are going to have to revisit that project charter to include that component in the charter that was originally proposed. So at this time, rather than taking any action on it, my recommendation would be that no action be taken on FSR 12/2020. We will do an amendment to it, or actually, if you'd like, maybe that's the direction, that staff be directed to amend the project charter to reflect the inclusion of a project manager in the project management of the construction.
Okay, that sounds like a possible motion to me. Moved by Councillor Gilmore, seconded by Councillor Van Vliet. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right, I'm pretty sure we're done with the fire hall for this evening. We'll take a
I withdraw my motion then.
Okay, Councillor Van Vliet's motion is withdrawn. Thank you. We don't have to vote on that, do we? No, she's withdrawn it, so.
No, I just have a quick question where we're going to be when we come back so I can get ready for that. If we're going to take a recess now, where are we coming back to in the agenda?
Short-term rentals.
We're going to be starting at the start there. COVID report, I think, will be the next one. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, we're back from that very short recess, and we'll carry on now with the rest of the evening's reports. We'll start with our COVID impact report by our CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will be brief. The report is actually quite succinct this meeting. Key thing to note is that we do have some vaccination clinics coming up in Wainfleet. I think the mayor noted them in his report. Tomorrow, October 27th, at the Wainfleet Community Firemen's Hall, November 13th and November 24th. In addition, the big sort of news, which was not available at the time of the report being prepared, was that the province on Friday issued some new directives regarding the reopening of Ontario. The key ones that come into play starting October 25th is the lifting of capacity limits where proof of vaccination is required in the areas of restaurants and bars, sports, recreation, fitness facilities, casinos, bingo halls, those types of locations. So we have modified our operations at the arena to accommodate that, and we'll be looking at the impacts on other locations. One of those impacts is the town hall itself, and for example, council chambers. We no longer require active screening at people entering, but we are requiring to maintain the social distancing at this time and the use of masks and other protocols. So the key thing associated with that provincial announcement as well is they are looking at potentially a spring 2022 further relaxation and elimination of protocols. So we look forward to that. And that's the summary of the report, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the motion being that admin staff report ASR 027-2021 respecting COVID-19 impact report be received as information. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Cridlin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving that? Opposed? So that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to our closed meeting investigator contract renewal, and I look to our clerk to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to all of council. Since January 2008, any person can request that an investigation be undertaken respecting whether a municipality has complied with closed meeting rules. Municipalities are able to appoint an investigator for this purpose, and if a municipality chooses not to appoint an investigator, the provincial ombudsman assumes that role. The review officers have extensive experience with municipal government and municipal processes. The township has not had an investigation since 2012. However, staff continue to utilize many of the ongoing education components relating to the closed meeting provisions. So staff is recommending tonight that council extend the current contract with LAS until 2023.
Okay, so the motion being the admin staff report respecting 28-2021 respecting closed meeting investigator contract renewal with Local Authority Services Limited be received, and that the current contract between the Township of Wainfleet and Local Authority Services Limited for closed meeting investigator services be renewed for a 2-year term ending on December 31st, 2023. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Gilmore, Councillor McClellan. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And we'll move to ASR 29-2021 regarding the 2022 council meeting schedule. Ms. Clerk, speak to that, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. A proposed 2022 council meeting schedule is before you tonight, which aligns with our procedure bylaw, with meetings occurring on a 3-week cycle. Staff recommend that no council meetings be scheduled for the month of October due to planning and execution of the election. Special meetings have been scheduled in March for budget deliberations, and key dates have also been flagged, such as nomination day for the election, election day, the new term of office commencement, and the inaugural meeting.
Okay, thank you. So motion being that admin staff report ASR 29-2021 respecting the 2022 council meeting schedule be received, and that the 2022 council meeting schedule outlined in the report be confirmed and adopted. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Cridlin and Councillor Gilmore. Any discussion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of observations. I noticed that there are several dates that are immediately following a statutory holiday. Notably, the 19th of April, which is right after Easter, August 2, which is right after the civic holiday, and September 6, right after Labor Day. I'm wondering if we can make any adjustment in those. Like I'm wondering whether that's, to me, that doesn't seem beneficial to staff when they're trying to get them ready for a meeting in a compressed week. Number one, I'll just send you the dates. There's a couple other conflict dates. I mean, not everybody can be everywhere all the time, but I'm just questioning why we're scheduling 3 meetings right after a statutory holiday.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so we do try and keep in line with our procedure bylaw being every 3 weeks. So there are some dates that we've had to push around. We want to try and keep that 3-week cycle, understanding that that they will conflict with holidays. But I guess if there's some conflicts that you want to discuss tonight, we can discuss. But we did our best to make sure that it was spaced out enough that we would continue to be consistent.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and again, just to build on that, the 3-week cycle is something that staff sort of count on when they're doing their reports, their preparations. If we, for example, amend that on a specific week, in one instance, then you're looking at either a 2-week cycle before or a 4-week cycle after in order to get back to the main 3-week cycle that we originally started with, and that actually often creates worse problems than maintaining the 3-week cycle through sort of a holiday weekend. So it's really not the best case in either scenario, but the sort of 3-week cycle after a holiday oftentimes works out better from a staffing perspective and a report preparation, report review, assembly of information. Than looking at a 2-week or a 4-week cycle, either before or after. So those are, I guess, are our comments.
Yeah, I would just suggest that then at least you look at August 2, because there's no meeting from August 2 till the day after Labor Day, August 6. Possibly move that to the 9th then. I mean, it's adjacent to a holiday weekend right in the dead center of the summer. So at least move that day. And the other dates, I'll just submit a list to the clerk and say these are the conflicts that I have, and if others do the same, which we all should do, then adjustments can be made accordingly. But that particular day, I don't see any particular reason why that can't go to August 9.
Mr. Mayor, and the deputy clerk and I did look at that specific day in August. And one of the issues that we had was it was bumping up fairly close to nomination day, which is the following week. And we were trying to sort of give ourselves enough time to deal with nomination day, which is, again, in the clerk's world, probably one of the big every 4-year type cycles. So that's the rationale for it going after the civic holiday, was we didn't want to bump up to the week before nomination day. But again, we are at your direction on that.
Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you. Through you again, just comments in looking, it's the last year and there's a lot of work still that's sort of on the table. So I know the answer is probably the 3-week cycle is ideal, but is this the year we should be doing a 2-week cycle to try to keep up to date with all the things? I see us having to call special meetings for just the fire hall alone. So I don't know how to plan for that from a staffing standpoint, obviously, but maybe just let it be noted that we're certainly going to have to be available for special meetings as needed to keep the fire hall moving, and any of the other projects that we're going to see come around this capital budget. So it'd be nice to make sure we have the staffing to do what we need to do to finish all these things that we've got planned. So just really a comment, and that we'll do our best to get that done.
Go ahead.
through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. I guess 2 points. One, on behalf of the clerk's department, I would say a 2-week cycle in an election year is definitely a non-starter. Unless we're looking at significantly beefing up our capacity, we've been working on, we've got a 3-week cycle down fairly pat. We do recognize there might be special meetings required from time to time, but 2 weeks is just unfeasible with the way we're structured right now. And just the second element, again, about, for example, the construction of the fire hall. Once we get into that sort of building cycle, really there won't be a lot of call for sort of direct council decisions being made, because again, a lot of it has already been made at the sort of design stage, the tendering stage, and really what you'll be seeing are perhaps updates or reports from the project manager, just giving you highlights of what's happening. But really from a decision-making perspective, once the tender is awarded, I think council's real participation in the sort of ultimate project is sort of a matter of sitting back and seeing the fruit of your labors, if you will, to see that construction completed. So.
And just regarding the scheduling, I looked at that too, and ultimately, if staff is happy with it, I'm happy with it, right? Because they're the ones that have to do the work and prepare all the reports. I looked at one date in April that I will not be here, and so be it. And the deputy mayor will sit in the chair and carry on the meeting. So that's just the way it's going to be. But we did talk about this and the efficiency for them, and they're in a pattern and they're used to it. And disrupting that would probably end up creating a worse situation than a more efficient situation. So, okay, so the motion's on the floor. We've had our discussion. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our 2021 third quarter capital update project. And we have our treasurer, Ms. Louie, to speak to that, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So staff report 30 was prepared to provide council with an update on the budgeted capital projects and the status of their completion. So in Appendix A, it identifies the capital projects along with the budgeted amounts, and spending is broken down by quarter. A few more projects have been fully completed, and the majority of the remaining projects are either complete and awaiting invoices or underway as we speak. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions if council has any. If they're about any specific projects, then I might need to defer to the department that's coordinating those.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just put it on the floor. Admin Staff Report 30-2021 regarding the capital expenditures to date be received for information. Mover seconder for that, please. Councillor Cridland and Councillor McClellan. Is there any discussion or questions? Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I think I just want to talk, there's the 3 that were mentioned that are grants. So my notes are that it's the Lakeshore retaining wall, the town hall repairs, and the recreational complex. So maybe just for example, the recreational complex, does that mean none of the work could be started until the grant part of that work is complete? And maybe that's why then there's nothing in the column. So I just want to verify that, is there work being done or not, and then the timing of when we might see that. Thanks.
Ms. Louie?
Yeah, sorry, through the mayor to all of council. I saw Richard turn his camera on there, so I thought he had something to add. In order for us to start spending, the grant has to be, they had to announce the grant and it had to be finalized. I'm not sure where Richard is in terms of I believe now we're eligible to start spending, but I think there's some preliminary work that needs to be done before we'll start seeing some invoices come in.
Okay, Mr. Nan.
Through your worship, to all members of council. Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, we have awarded the engineering for the drainage portion to be started already. So Once the announcement was made earlier this summer, we started searching out, and we put an RFP out for some engineering services, and that's been awarded to Spreed Engineering. So we are starting that. We've also been in contact with various contractors and design people for the lighting portion. So we're well underway now that the announcement's been made. But now it's all the preliminary or the background work that's involved in doing all the design and and making sure we can accommodate everything that we're going to be required to complete the project.
Okay, thank you, and I'll look to our CAO for further comment.
Yeah, just to build on that, through you, Mr. Mayor, and for members of council and the public, please keep in mind this is a multi-year project. It was never intended to be all finished in 1 year. So the complex project will be sort of a continuous thing. I believe we have it over 3 or 4 years in order to get to the final completion.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, it's on the floor. We've completed our discussion. All in favor of receiving that? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to the election sign bylaw, and I'll look to our clerk to speak to that memo, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. After the 2018 municipal election, there were a number of suggestions proposed by candidates and staff that warranted further review of our current election sign bylaw. The proposed new bylaw addresses minor changes, including updating definitions, clearly defining election sign restrictions on public and private properties, and ensuring consistency with area municipalities. So staff have provided a newly proposed draft bylaw, and that would be placed on the next available agenda for consideration.
Okay, thank you. So motion being memorandum submitted by the Deputy Clerk respecting election sign bylaw be received as information. Mover seconder for that, Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Van Vliet. Any discussion? Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 3.2.2 is no person shall place a sign on all those places that are listed. Could we just change that to only put election signs on private property? Because the last election we had a lot of candidates and there was signs everywhere. So can we do that? I know other municipalities do only private property.
Okay, I'll look to the CAO with 30 years of experience on that sort of thing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if that is the desire or wish of council, by all means, we have the ability to regulate township-owned roads. Historically, the township has permitted signs to, for example, be placed within road allowances that are owned by the township. We have always sort of emphasized that prior to doing that, the property owner obtain the permission of the abutting property owner to do that, so that you don't get a candidate sign placed in front of somebody's house on a road allowance that is outside the property. Bottom line is, yes, you can do it. But I think we have, I think, tightened up things enough now that if, for example, somebody wants to put a sign on the private property side of a roadside ditch, the way it's written now, you're allowed to encroach onto the road allowance, provided that the abutting property owner has no objection to it.
Okay, I don't think that answered my question all the way, but that's okay. I had two other points. One is, can we restrict the number of signs that candidates have? For two reasons. One reason is it's expensive and not everybody has the same financial ability to pay for all the signs. And the other one was, there's just so many of them. Like, I think last time there was 13 candidates for alderman and 6 for mayor. So that was a lot of signs. I had one more point, and the other one is, can we restrict them and just do corrugated plastic and not the plastic bag signs that are single-use plastics that aren't recyclable? So it's 3 points.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are getting into some questions which are sort of legal and freedom of speech related, and I know our solicitor is online. I don't want to put her on the spot. That is something we could certainly research. But my initial take on that is that limiting the total number of signs that a single candidate can put out may be a restriction that sort of exceeds our capacity under, again, freedom of speech and related aspects of the law. So I would strongly recommend or suggest that that's not a reasonable approach. The second comment about the type of material used in election signs. Again, there are a variety of different materials that are out there. Some people can use wooden signs, like sheets of plywood. Some people use recyclable cardboard. Some people use, as you say, the sort of plastic bag over wire mesh type signs. I'd caution against going down that route. Each of the signs have sort of different price points and different types of components to them. And from an accessibility perspective, I think you don't want to get into restricting specific construction types or materials, provided that, again, our bylaw already contains this, that the signs are cleaned up after the election within a specific time frame. So really what material the sign is made out of, really it becomes almost moot in the ultimate scheme of things. But again, if those are things that you as a council wish us to explore further, we can perhaps approach the township solicitor for an opinion on each of those matters or any of those matters at your discretion. Again, there's no urgency to get this sign passed today, but we can get that information perhaps for the next meeting.
Councillor Van Vliet, would you further?
Yeah, I would really like to investigate the bag over signs, because that's like plastic bags that are not recyclable.
Yeah, they are. I think they are.
I don't think they are. Well, if we could just take a look at that.
Yeah, let's research.
And I would really like to only see signs on private property instead of scattered everywhere all over the township.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor, so will Councillor McLeod.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have to disagree with Councillor Van Vliet on this. You know, it's great if we're here, people know us. You can knock on doors and say, and get all over town. If you happen to be somebody that's from the Lakeshore area or a different area and you're relatively new to town, you don't know enough people in town to put out your signs. Like, we should be able to put them on the back side of a ditch on any road allowance that we own. Because if you, otherwise, somebody might have lived here 40 years and worked out of town every day, and they know 25 people in town. It's great. You grew up here, went to school with everybody, your family, your relatives are here. It doesn't work. It doesn't make it a fair process for somebody that's new that's getting into this. I agree with you can't have so many signs. Your signs have to be so far apart. I get that part, but I still think that it's a public office. We should be able to put them on public roads.
Okay. Do we want to send this back for some further research by staff, or to look, excuse me, at least speak to the solicitor about it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll make that direction to staff. Okay, Councillor Gilmore?
Well, it's already going back. It's you're bringing back a bylaw, so just take those comments under advisement and bring us something to vote on.
Okay, thank you. That is completed. Planning staff report, memorandum dedicates certain lands as part of Marshville Drive. I'll look to our planner to speak to that, please.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So through the registration of the SAW Developments Plan of Subdivision, a section of the Marshville Drive extension was not deeded to the township. And so this section remains deeded to SAW Developments, even though the intention was for the entirety of that Marshville Drive extension to be deeded to the township. So this has created a legal access issue for 3 of the lots 10, 11, and 12. And the township solicitor has reviewed the matter and recommended that the lands be transferred to the township to remain consistent with the approved plan of subdivision. And the solicitor also recommended that a road dedication bylaw be adopted. And so bylaw 32 on the agenda this evening is that road dedication bylaw.
Okay, thank you. So a memorandum submitted by the planner respecting bylaw to dedicate lands as part of Marshfield Drive be received as information. Basically, it's us just simply, it was an oversight, I understand, when it was initially done. So mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Cridlin, Councillor Gilmore, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. And moving on to the short draft of the short-term rental bylaw. And Ms. Earl, welcome, and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the rest of council. This report will review the need that council identified to further regulate short-term rental accommodations through a licensing system. So staff has worked with the township solicitor to draft the bylaw to license and regulate those short-term rentals. In addition, staff have identified that public consultation is a very important factor in the review of the draft licensing bylaw. So we would look to council to direct staff to commence that public consultation process.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is that planning staff report PSR 11/2021 respecting a short-term rental bylaw be received, and that staff be directed to commence a public consultation process regarding the draft bylaw for licensing of short-term rentals prior to final council consideration. We have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Cridlin and Councillor Van Vliet. And discussion. Lost my page here. Go ahead, Councillor McComb.
Okay. I have a number of items here. So I'll just start and go through them. First off, the way this is written, it implies you have a right to buy a house and then rent it out for short-term rentals. All of these we'll concentrate on the lakeshore, but all of the lakeshore, all these houses is zoned residential. There is no right to turn them into commercial lots. It's not part of our zoning. It's not there. Having said that, that then goes on that you get a license, and then the fire chief goes out and some other town officials check it. As far as I'm concerned, there should be a fee that you pay prior to it. You pay the fire chief or the deputy fire chief, our chief building official, and our septic people to go through the house. If the house was built for 4 people and the septic bed has 4 people, or was built for 4 people, it doesn't matter that you put 2 more pull-out couches in a living room and 1 in the dining room, and now you say you have sleeping quarters for 10 instead of 4. That's not what it was designed for. You'll blow out the septic system. So that needs to be looked at, and that should be done before you can even apply. And also, they should look at the number of parking spaces. And if there's 2 parking spaces or 4, that's all you're allowed, is what you can fit on your own property, because there is no parking along the lakeshore. When the fire chief's going through there, he should check that smoke detectors work, the CO2 is working, to make sure that, so we go there. The rental should be a minimum of 2 weeks, because I can tell you right now, when you come down and rent it for a weekend, that's when nobody cares. If you rent it 2 weeks, it's families that are coming in, and then you'll be, how do I say this politically correct? They'll be more civil in their stay. I don't know if that was proper, but that's what it is. It talks about an agent. I don't want to deal with agents. We need to deal with the homeowner. So we need the cell phone number of the homeowner. So if we get a complaint at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're not calling a real estate agent that's closed from 4 o'clock Friday till 9 o'clock Monday and we had no results. We need to own this thing, and there should be, if you own this thing and you get a complaint at 2 o'clock in the morning, too bad that we woke you up, because your tenants are keeping somebody else awake and the disturbance. And there should be a 2 or 3 hour minimum that they have to show up at the place, or they lose their license. Like, this is not a God-given right to come down here and turn this into Canada's Wonderland. This is a residential neighborhood. My other thing, and Will, you can, and the lawyers can advise me on this, but our license should be based on the property taxes. Because if it's commercial, you pay twice the property tax? Or is it 3 times, Will? It's definitely more. So whatever the difference is, that should be the minimum based on your house. We know what they pay for taxes. If they're paying 10 grand a year, the license fee for that house should be $10,000. You got to make it so they're going to pay attention. All of these little things in there that, oh, if they have a fire, it's $500, it's $200. You can't enforce that. You'll never get that done. You got to do it right at the front. You got to make it so they understand it's going to cost them big bucks to do this and stay up there and hire somebody else to take care of this, and they don't care about the neighbors. I care about our citizens, not somebody that's coming in here trying to make a quick buck or pay for a cottage in 10 years and then say, to hell with the neighbors, I don't care. That's not what this is supposed to be. So I'll stop there. There's a list here, another half a page long, but that's enough for now.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Will.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if Lindsay and or Jennifer might be able to respond to some of those items raised. I think I have 7 that were listed, but if one of you could take a stab.
Sure, thank you, Will, and through you, Mr. Mayor. A number of those items were addressed in the drafting of the bylaw because of historical evidence that we've seen from other municipalities. So some of the key findings of that review included things like limiting the number of bedroom units or persons per bedroom to 2. Things that we also had to be addressed were fire safety inspections had to be completed as part of the application for the licenses. We didn't have a minimum on the 2-week rental, so we can look at that. The idea of having an agent acting on behalf of the homeowner was also addressed. Sometimes the homeowners don't live in the township. They live perhaps somewhere else in the GTA. So a lot of the times they also have agents that are local that can respond. And staff did include a timeline for responding within 2 hours. So that was also included in the draft bylaw. We didn't include the license fee schedule yet. That's still being reviewed. So we don't have an idea. I'm looking at the other municipalities and what they're charging and how their bylaws have been operating. But at the same time, it's important to note that we're looking at cost recovery and implications to implement the licensing bylaw. So that's part of our review for the licensing fee. So we need to take into consideration staff time, resources, and enforcement.
Okay, thank you. I just wonder if we could hear from Jennifer, who's our legal counsel, regarding some of those points. There may be some there that are unconstitutional or whatever right off. So if you could address that sort of issue, it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Council. As Ms. Earle has indicated, a number of the points raised by Councillor McClellan are dealt with in the draft bylaw. The one concern that I would have with respect to some of the suggestions made is an attempt to regulate the types of persons who are renting by prolonging the minimum rental period to 2 weeks. I think there would be some difficulty in defending a provision of a bylaw that's intended to regulate the types of persons who might come and utilize the short-term rental accommodation. So that is certainly one that jumped out at me in terms of being potentially difficult to defend. Otherwise, as I indicated, we've addressed parking spaces within the draft bylaw. The idea of extra pull-out couches not turning a 4-person house to an 8-person house is addressed through the occupancy limit, which is tied to the number of bedrooms within the dwelling unit. And certainly, as Ms. Earle has indicated, we are continuing to look at an appropriate license fee. So those are my comments at this point.
Thank you. And the one that jumped out at me that Councillor McClellan spoke to was the 2 weeks, because that really does restrict, a lot of people from not being able to come due to other obligations, expense-wise, that sort of thing. So, but we'll look at that and go from there. Councillor McClellan.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest you look at Collingwood or Blue Mountain. I think they're at 3 weeks, and most condo corporations in Ontario, it's a 2 to 3 week minimum rental if you're going to go there. So I don't think we're breaking any rules. We just got to look at it right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gilmore.
I agree with Councilor McClellan. I mean, you're not limiting access to, quote, your quote, the type of person. We're just saying that you got to pay for 2 weeks. It doesn't reference any, quote, type of person. So anyway, my comments would be that I want to see this run its course with the public consultation. I mean, all these are valid comments, and there's been a lot of work done. I note that, but I want to see a fulsome public meeting in a setting where the public can actually attend rather than video chats. And so I'd like to see us get to that point where we can figure out a venue where everybody that wants to come can come, and we can have a proper public meeting, and then revisit this. That'd be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before Councillor Craylin? Go ahead. I called upon you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Right. Again, some other things that just occurred to me too, or things, just definitions. So the definitions that are there are good, but things like garden suites we're growing secondary suites, we're growing granny suites, and so just so that people are clear, if that's in or that's out. And I'm sure it's probably covered in the definitions, but there's certainly a lot more of that development happening. And then, like Councillor Gilmore, I wouldn't mind maybe even staff just elaborating more so right now about their thoughts on what this open house process might look like or what they were thinking. So talk a little bit more about what the engagement might be. That would be good to hear also from staff. Thank you.
Okay, I wonder either Will or Lindsay, who's been working on that. Lindsay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the rest of council. At this moment, we are going to start with our webpage, get that up and running, get a short survey and a comment section there, and have that blasted out on social media venues. So having a public meeting at a larger venue, we can definitely look into that and get something like that scheduled. I think a lot of the times and what other municipalities have experienced is that we're hearing a lot of the same concerns. So I was hoping to at least get that kind of sense before having the public meeting of the items that we're going to be hearing about. A lot of the times we're hearing the nuisance complaints, the noise, safety concerns, parking, etc.
Okay, Councillor Van Vliet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to come at this from a different point because I've gotten tons of questions from people who own short-term rentals who actually live in Wainfleet. One of the questions I've got was, sorry, I can't remember the section. 4.5, the occupancy limit. How would that work when you have younger families with small children who the parents are staying in the bedrooms with the children? Are you still limited to your capacity there. That was one of the questions. The other one was, why only 180 days? And another comment I got was that the owners who are local feel that it should still be complaint-driven for the enforcement because they're right here. Is there some kind of system we can set up for people who actually live here? And that the draft doesn't address demerit points for any kind of garbage that's left around. And the last one is, why do they have to post a boil water advisory in every single room and not just the kitchen and bathrooms? That's all I have.
Okay, those points are being noted down, I see, by Jennifer and Lindsay, so that will come into it. Any comments there from Lindsay or Jennifer regarding those comments by Councillor Van Vliet?
Yeah. Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm actually going to defer the first few questions to Jennifer, who is instrumental in drafting those occupancy rates and the timeline.
Okay. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council, the occupancy limit would apply as drafted based on the number of bedrooms. So if you do have parents with children, if it's only a 2-bedroom house, the occupancy limit is still 4 persons under the bylaw as presently drafted. The intention there was to put some kind of reasonable limit on the number of persons at the short-term rental unit. I think one of the primary concerns, as I understand it, is that far too many people are coming to one of these short-term rentals for a weekend or a week or whatever time period it is rented for. And so in an attempt to try and mitigate that concern, we've imposed in the draft bylaw the occupancy limit that's tied to the number of bedrooms to prevent people from sleeping on the floor and in the kitchen and in the bathtub, for instance. That's sort of the attempt there. In terms of the 180-day limit for total usage of the dwelling unit as a short-term rental unit, my understanding is that there have been some concerns expressed to members of council about homes being used for short-term rental purposes in a manner that changes the character of the surrounding neighborhood or has an adverse impact on other adjacent or nearby residences that are not used for that purpose. So the intent in placing a restriction or a limit on the number of days per year that a particular property could be used as a short-term rental unit was an effort to address and mitigate those concerns. In terms of complaint-based enforcement of the bylaw, certainly complaints can give rise to enforcement, but I think that the bylaw as drafted provides significantly more teeth to the township in terms of being able to enforce with respect to common complaints that we expect to receive: noise, nuisance, garbage, parking, those kinds of things, and just gives the township the tools that are necessary to try and balance the interests of those who wish to operate short-term rental units and perhaps members of the surrounding neighborhood who are not as supportive. I noted that one of the other points was no demerit points for garbage in the draft bylaw. I think that's something that could easily be addressed. And in terms of the boil water advisory being posted in each room, that's simply a matter of safety or thoroughness to ensure that that persons aren't placed at risk by not having seen it. So those are my comments in response to the matters raised.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McClellan, further?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the one other thing that I noticed missing in here, there's nothing talking about somebody renting a short term for 3 weeks, a month, 5 weeks, the whole summer, and then coming and opening up a business, a skidoo rental business out of the neighborhood because the guy owns 6 skidoos. And then we have enough problems with that in one end of town now. We don't need it up and down the beach, and there's nothing in there that says that you can't sublet it while you're there, and you can't run a business out of it. So somewhere, get that put in there. It's just, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, there's no God-given right to come down here and open up a business. It's not zoned commercial. We should not be doing this. We should be discouraging this in every way, shape, and form, because our taxpayers and homeowners out there pay huge taxes. They don't need this headache, and there's nothing in it for the town. None of this brings us a dime. So why are we accommodating this at all?
Okay, thank you. One of the things we do have to be sensitive to, though, is to make sure that we look at this from more than one perspective. I completely agree with Councillor McClellan and his points. Nobody wants, and I've heard from families who have a house next to one of these rentals, and it's a nightmare. And I totally agree that we need to put into place many, many controls on that. The only thing I want that we must caution about being safe on here is that there are families in Wainfleet who do have a cottage, that do rent it out, and it's rented. I have personal knowledge to a family of 3 that are quiet, and they're there for a week. That sort of thing, we don't want to stop that, because that is good. That's good business for Wainfleet. Those people come, and they might live in Welland or St. Catharines. So everything that we've talked about is good. I agree with that. But we also we have to be sensitive also to those people who do it properly and do make sure that everything is being done correctly, and that they're not bothering the neighbors, and they wouldn't rent to those sort of. That's one of the struggles all along here that I've had with this, is how do you control the party houses and keep everything good, but not affect the good people who have a cottage that let their neighbors rent it for a week, and who are just good people who swim on the beach and make no noise. So that's something that we also have to be sensitive to as we bring forth this new bylaw. So, and I'm totally in concurrence with Councillor McClellan and everybody else about the party houses. We do need to get them totally under control, but we also just have to be sensitive to the situations which I just spoke to. Councillor McClellan.
So I agree with you on that. I don't know how to do it. I don't know if somebody's owned a house for the last 10 years or 20 years, pick a number, and they've always rented it out. Maybe they get a grandfather clause till the property changes ownership, and then it changes. Rules are made because of bad people, not because of the good people, right? And unfortunately, we're dealing with people that don't care what happens in a neighborhood or what happens to the makeup of the neighborhood. The good, nice people that own it, I feel sorry for them, because this is putting a burden on them. But how do you set that up without causing discrimination? You give them one guy a pass and the next guy not.
And that has been the one thing since this even began a year ago, I kept struggling with that. How do we deal with this, that we don't punish good people who are not doing anything wrong and are looking after it? And that is the challenge of this bylaw, because we need the teeth in all those areas that we're talking about. Because also I get calls from, when are you guys going to fix this problem? That next door house is a party house. I get those calls, and I'm aware of that. But there's also the other side that somehow we have to figure out and land in a spot that helps those people as well, who are being very responsible. So we leave that difficult job to Lindsay and Jennifer, and I'm sure between them they'll bring back after their public consultation, they'll bring back some good language for us to work on. Okay, is there any more comments on that? Okay, so the motion, should I read it again, or planning staff report respecting short-term rental be received, and that staff be directed to commence a public consultation process regarding the draft bylaw for licensing of short-term rentals prior to final council consideration. It's on the floor, and if there's no further discussion, we'll vote on that. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer and Lindsay. Okay, moving on to our Public Works Staff Report, Capital Project Update, Gents Road Bridge, and I'll look to our Operations Manager, Richard Nan, to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, to you, through you to the rest of council. Staff felt it was prudent to bring an update to you in regards to the Gents Road Bridge replacement project. We've completed the engineering, and part of that process of completing the engineering in consultation back and forth a couple of times with the MPCA, but we've completed the engineering process. But we also do a cost analysis based on the input from the design work and the materials, etc. And based on the cost analysis, we've noticed a very steep increase in material costing. We've also taken some recent tender bids from local contractors, local contracts of similar nature, and tried to incorporate those numbers into the mix. So we did a cost analysis, and we did provide a couple of options as well for council's consideration. The first option was, the existing, the original design was to go with a CSP pipe, which is, again, even though all three options are over what we anticipated spending for the bridge, but the original design work was for CSPs. But we factored in the life expectancy as we did these cost analysis. And the life expectancy of CSP is around 40 years. So give or take the materials that flow through it, the water contaminations, etc. So there's different ways. You can never seem to get 40 years, but it depends on the erosion factor, etc. But we also investigated HDPE, which is high density polyethylene, and for the additional costing is there, yes, but it also almost doubles the lifespan. Like, we're looking at a 75-year lifespan with an HDPE pipe. And it's similar to what was performed recently in one of our recent our neighboring communities of Pelham. They used it as well. So we thought it would be prudent to bring these options back to council to let you aware that we are going to be slightly over budget, and we're looking for the additional funding so we can proceed with the project utilizing the HDP pipe work. And I'm open for any comments or questions from council.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So the potential motion being that 22-2021 respecting Gents Road Bridge replacement update be received, and that council authorize the manager of operations to proceed with the tendering of the Gents Road Bridge replacement utilizing the use of HDPE, and that any project overages be funded utilizing reserves. Mover seconder, please. Councillor Gilmore, Councillor McClellan, and discussion. Okay, I see none. When I was going through it for like $75,000 more, we get double the lifespan out of the HDPE, so makes a lot of sense. Okay, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one question for Richard. So based on that information, is it safe to assume that probably all future bridge replacements will be of this nature versus concrete, because this is essentially equal to the lifespan of a concrete bridge at quite a bit less?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Gilmore, the issue becomes is we're fortunate in this instance to actually change over from an actual bridge structure to culverts, because we've managed to convince the MPCA and the authorities that we can maintain the water flow. Normally, once you have a bridge structure there, you'll be replacing with another bridge structure. They normally don't allow you just to switch it over to culverts like this. But because we've proved the fact that they've allowed it upstream of our location, and that we can continue to provide the hydrology to allow the water to flow through with the pipes that we're doing, they've allowed us to proceed with it. But normally, when you're replacing a bridge, it's usually like for like, and that's the unfortunate part. But it's mainly to keep the hydrology the same or better than what the existing structures were.
Okay, so yeah, that's good information. And I would also note that thankfully, most of the bridges that need to be replaced are upstream of Gents Road. So they'll have a hard time giving us a hard time when this one was okay and everything else is upstream. So it might be a good idea to get that in writing for future generations.
Well, I think the best part is, through your worship to Councillor Gilmore. I think the best part is once this one's approved, it's already in writing. So that's why we're hoping to go ahead with it.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, Councillor Cridland.
Sorry, just building on what Councillor Gilmore was asking about for all the other bridges, does any of this information then, the review and the different methods, provide us better information to update, let's say at budget time, the new cost for the remaining bridges? Just in general.
Through your worship, well, technically, I mean, it's right bang on with the forecast for the bridge replacements anyways. I mean, the previous forecasting we had done was upwards around the $900,000 previous for the Gents Road. So we're not far off of the forecasting that was done by the engineering firm. So even with HDP rather than concrete, we're still in the ballpark of what the annual forecasting or the average forecasting is for replacements are currently.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's Councillor McClellan.
Just one quick thing. We definitely don't want to update the estimates now. The price of steel is through the roof. The price of this plastic pipe is through the roof. And from everything we've seen at work, the price of steel by the end of next summer will be cheaper than it was before the pandemic. So let's not scare anybody.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. Councillor Van Vliet. Yeah. All in favor of this motion? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, items of correspondence. Are there any items of correspondence? Okay, seeing none. Move to the bylaws. Bylaw 32, 2021, being a bylaw to dedicate certain lands as part of Marshfield Drive in the Township of Wainfleet. The motion being that bylaw 32, 2021, as listed on the agenda, be read and passed. A mover seconder for that, please. Councillor Gilmore, Councillor McClellan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Any notices of motion? Okay, seeing none, we move to a closed meeting. Motion that council now move into closed session to discuss items pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act respecting a legal opinion, acquisition and disposition of land matter and staffing matters. Mover and a seconder for that to go into close. Councillor Van Vliet and Councillor Cridland. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And we'll move into closed session. Thank you.